My boss fired me and told HR I stole from the company so I'd never work again. A month later, he texted, "We need you back urgently." I showed up with an attorney and a copy of the audit. What happened next destroyed his career. So here's the thing about getting fired. Most people think the worst part is losing the job. Wrong. The worst part is when your boss lies to HR, tells them you're a thief, and makes sure you'll never work in your field again. Blacklists you across the entire industry. Makes it so recruiters go silent the moment they call your former employer for a reference. That's the part that makes you want to burn everything down. Name's Henry Caldwell, 51 years old. This happened 10 months ago, and I'm still processing how spectacularly my former boss destroyed his own career while trying to destroy mine. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why karma isn't just a concept. It's a paper trail that leads straight to federal prison. I worked at MedTech Solutions for 8 years. Started as a quality assurance specialist fresh out of the Navy after 6 years of service. 6 years of learning that attention to detail isn't just important, it's the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. That mindset served me well in the medical device industry, where one documentation error could mean FDA shutdown or worse, patient harm. Worked my way up to Director of Quality Assurance by year 5. Managed a team of 4 people who actually knew what they were doing. Linda Santos, my senior quality analyst who'd been with the company 12 years, Carl Hughes, who handled compliance documentation, Maria Gonzalez, who managed supplier audits, and Steve Martinez, our newest hire, who'd come from Johnson & Johnson with impressive credentials. I oversaw compliance for $12 million in annual revenue across 2 product lines. The company made surgical instruments, forceps, scissors, retractors, and patient monitoring devices, the kind of equipment that goes into operating rooms and ICUs. Serious business with serious regulations. 1 batch record error, 1 contamination incident, 1 traceability gap, and we'd have FDA investigators crawling through every file cabinet and computer drive we owned. My boss was Philip Barnes, Vice President of Operations. Guy was 49, had an MBA from Northwestern that he mentioned in about 70% of all conversations. When I was at Kellogg, he'd say, referencing his business school like it was some kind of magical credential that made him smarter than everyone else. Drove a silver BMW 5 Series that he parked diagonally across 2 spots every morning. Not because the spots were small, because he thought his car deserved protection from door dings. Classic executive entitlement. Philip had been VP for 3 years when this story starts. Got promoted from a management role at another medical device company because our previous VP retired and the board wanted someone with industry experience. First 6 months he was fine, kept his distance, let me run my department the way I'd been running it successfully for years. Occasionally forwarded my compliance reports to the CEO after making minor edits so it looked like he was involved in the details. Classic middle management move, take credit without doing work. The friction started small. Philip would change my quality protocols without consulting me, then present them in executive meetings like the revisions were his brilliant insights. He'd take credit for cost-saving measures my team implemented, like when we renegotiated our calibration services contract and saved $18,000 annually. That savings went into his quarterly report as VP Operations Initiatives. He'd forward my FDA compliance reports to CEO William Foster with his name in the header instead of mine. His assistant, Jennifer Parker, would literally edit the PDF metadata so it showed prepared by Philip Barnes instead of Henry Caldwell. Standard office politics, right? The kind of petty territory marking that happens in every corporate environment. I kept my head down and did the work. Told myself it didn't matter as long as the company stayed compliant and my team was respected. Looking back, I was naive. When someone shows you who they are, a credit thief without shame, believe them the first time. The real problem started in March of last year. CEO William Foster called an all-hands meeting to announce we'd be implementing a new digital quality management system, basically moving from paper-based documentation to full electronic records. Everything, batch records, quality inspections, supplier audits, customer complaints, corrective actions, deviation reports, all integrated into one platform. This is the future of medical device manufacturing. William said during the announcement, full traceability, real-time data, faster FDA response times. In theory, he was right. Electronic quality systems can eliminate transcription errors, speed up document retrieval during inspections, and provide better trend analysis. In reality, these implementations are where companies go to die. I'd seen it happen at my previous employer before joining MedTech. A company decides to modernize, hires consultants, picks expensive software, and 18 months later, they're hemorrhaging cash while the new system still doesn't work. Philip was supposed to lead our transition. Made sense on paper. VP Operations should oversee quality systems. He talked a big game in the kickoff meeting. Brought in slides about digital transformation and operational excellence. Used buzzwords like synergy and optimization and best practices without actually explaining what any of it meant. Classic MBA presentation style, lots of strategy speak, zero tactical detail. He was drowning within 2 weeks. The man had no idea what he was doing. I sat in project meetings watching him fumble through basic questions about validation requirements and data migration. "Henry, what do you think about the validation approach?" He'd ask, trying to make it look like he was delegating when really he was clueless about FDA validation requirements. Should we do full validation or can we get away with verification? That question told me everything. In medical device manufacturing, you don't get away with anything when it comes to FDA compliance. You do what the regulations require, period. 21 CFR Part 820 doesn't care about your budget or timeline. Computer system validation is mandatory, not optional. Philip had picked a software vendor, Quality Pro Systems, primarily because they'd taken him to some industry conference in San Diego back in February. The Quality Pro team really impressed me in California. He'd say constantly. Translation: they bought him steak dinners at expensive restaurants and promised implementation would be easy. He didn't properly scope the requirements, didn't involve department heads in the selection process, didn't account for our custom validation protocols or the specialized documentation our cardiac device clients required. Just signed a contract because the sales rep was friendly and showed him polished demo videos. The vendor quoted $180,000 for the full project. Philip told CEO William Foster and the board it would cost $110,000 and be done in 4 months. Where'd he get those numbers? No idea. Maybe he thought he could negotiate them down mid-project. Maybe he genuinely believed he could cut corners and still deliver FDA-compliant results. Either way, he was catastrophically wrong by May, 6 weeks into implementation. We were already $85,000 over budget with maybe 30% actual completion. And that's being generous about the completion percentage. The old paper system was partially shut down because Philip's implementation plan called for gradual cutover. So we were stuck in this nightmare middle state where half our data lived in filing cabinets and half lived in Quality Pro servers and nothing connected properly. Production was reporting batch record discrepancies daily. We'd show 150 surgical forceps completed in the new system, but physically we only had 127 units in finished goods inventory. That's an $8,000 variance just sitting there unresolved. Multiply that across 40 different SKUs and you can imagine the chaos. Quality couldn't close monthly reports properly because data was scattered across 2 incompatible systems. Month-end reporting that normally took us 3 days was stretching to 10 days because we had to reconcile records manually. Customer complaints were getting delayed because the quality team couldn't access historical data quickly enough. We'd promise response times to medical device distributors based on what the old system showed, then discover we couldn't pull the supporting documentation from either platform. Lost a $95,000 order to a surgical center in Denver because we couldn't demonstrate lot traceability within their required 48-hour timeline. They went to a competitor who could provide immediate documentation. Meanwhile, we had an FDA inspection scheduled for September. If our quality management system was broken during that visit, we'd lose our manufacturing license. Game over. No more business, no more jobs, no more company. FDA doesn't care about your implementation timeline or budget constraints. They care about one thing. Can you demonstrate that every medical device leaving your facility is safe and properly documented? Everything was on fire, and Philip just kept scheduling meetings where he'd ask Quality Pro for status updates, nod along to technical explanations he clearly didn't understand, then tell us everything was on track. The vendor assures me we'll be fully operational by July, he'd announce in executive meetings while I sat there knowing we were months away from basic functionality. I spent 5 weeks working 14-hour days fixing Philip's disaster. Not because I'm some kind of corporate hero, but because I had 4 people on my team burning out, and letting the implementation fail would have meant layoffs. Plus, my Navy training kicked in. When you're in a crisis, you don't abandon ship, you fix the problem. And I had my family depending on me. My son Alex was starting his senior year of high school. already talking about college applications. My wife Susan was caring for her 78-year-old mother who'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's 6 months earlier. The last thing we needed was me losing my job because Philip was too proud to admit he'd screwed up, so I fixed it. My team and I pulled together all the documentation Quality Pro needed: validation protocols, risk assessments, user requirement specifications, installation qualification procedures, all the stuff that should have been completed during the planning phase, but Philip had skipped to save time and money. I rewrote the entire implementation timeline with realistic milestones and proper dependencies, the kind of project plan you'd learn in any basic project management course. Created workarounds so we could maintain FDA compliance while transitioning between systems. Built custom data bridges using our IT contractor to sync information between the legacy paper system and Quality Pro's database. Set up nightly reconciliation processes to catch discrepancies before they became major problems. Established parallel documentation workflows so nothing fell through the cracks during cutover. Linda Santos worked weekends helping me build test scenarios for every possible user interaction. Carl Hughes stayed late every night validating electronic batch records against paper originals. Maria Gonzalez rebuilt our entire supplier audit database from scratch because the data migration had corrupted half the records. Steve Martinez, despite being the newest team member, volunteered to handle user training for production staff. By mid-June, the system was functioning properly. Document control hit 99.2% accuracy. Inventory reconciliation dropped from 10 days to 4 days. Month-end reporting was back to normal timelines. We'd not only stabilized the disaster, but actually improved on our previous performance metrics. The FDA inspection in September went flawlessly, missed 0 findings, 0 observations, complete compliance across all quality system requirements. Philip took credit for all of it. In the July executive meeting, he handed out copies of my project recovery plan with his name prominently displayed at the top. My implementation timeline, my process redesign, my compliance strategies, my team's validation work, all printed with Quality Pro implementation success, prepared by Philip Barnes, VP Operations, in bold letters across the header. I found out because Linda texted me a photo from the boardroom. Thought you should see this, she wrote at 3:15 p.m. on July 18th. The image showed Philip standing at the head of the conference table, pointing to a slide that displayed my work timeline while board members nodded approvingly. The board gave him a $25,000 performance bonus for successfully leading the quality system recovery and ensuring FDA compliance. $25,000 for work he not only didn't do but had actively sabotaged through poor planning. Meanwhile, my team and I got nothing except the satisfaction of knowing we'd saved the company from regulatory shutdown. I should have quit right then. Should have walked into William Foster's office and explained exactly what had happened, who had really fixed the system, and why Philip deserved to be fired instead of rewarded. But I didn't. Told myself Philip's lies would eventually catch up with him, that competent people always get recognized eventually. That truth has a way of surfacing in corporate environments. Wrong, so completely naively wrong. That bonus meeting was on a Friday afternoon. Monday morning, July 22nd, Philip called me into his office at 9 a.m. sharp. "Close the door," he said when I walked in, not bothering to look up from his computer screen. He was standing by his window overlooking the parking lot, hands clasped behind his back, doing that fake contemplative pose executives do when they're about to deliver bad news. The posture was too deliberate, too practiced. He'd rehearsed this moment. "We need to talk about some serious discrepancies I've discovered in your department's expense reports." My stomach dropped. Not fear exactly, more like that gut-level recognition when you realize someone's about to lie directly to your face and there's nothing you can do to stop them. "What discrepancies?" I asked, though I already knew this conversation wasn't about actual problems. This was a performance Philip had scripted in advance. He turned around slowly, his face completely neutral, rehearsed. "Over the past 6 months, there have been irregularities in vendor payments processed through your authorization code. Duplicate invoices, payments to companies that don't appear to have legitimate business relationships with us. I've documented approximately $75,000 in questionable transactions." I just stared at him. 6 months. $75,000. My authorization code, none of that made sense. "Philip, that's impossible. Every vendor payment I authorize has corresponding purchase orders and budget approvals. If there are discrepancies, they're data entry errors from the system migration. I've already reported this to HR and CEO Foster." You're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. I need your badge, laptop, and company phone. Security will escort you out. The room tilted sideways. 8 years. I'd given this company 8 years of my life. Missed Alex's baseball games because of FDA inspection prep. Worked weekends when equipment calibrations fell behind schedule. Skipped family dinners because batch record reviews couldn't wait until Monday. Put in vacation days and holidays because production schedules got disrupted and we needed emergency quality assessments. And this guy, this complete fraud who couldn't implement basic software without burning $85,000 and nearly destroying our FDA compliance, was calling me a thief. I want to see the documentation. I want to know exactly what transactions you're talking about. That's not how this works, Henry. HR will provide relevant information during their investigation. Philip, I process dozens of vendor payments every month. Quality lab services, equipment calibrations, consultant fees. If there are irregularities, they're system glitches, not fraud. Badge, laptop, phone. Now, his tone shifted completely. Cold, final, dismissive. He wasn't discussing this anymore. He'd made his decision, probably days or weeks ago. This entire meeting was just him executing a plan he'd already put in motion. I handed everything over. He placed my badge, laptop, and company phone into a clear plastic bin, the kind you'd use for confiscated items at airport security. Like I was being processed as a criminal. Someone from HR will contact you within 48 hours. You should probably get a lawyer. That last sentence was the real knife twist, not necessary for any HR protocol. He said it specifically to make sure I understood he wasn't just firing me, he was destroying me. Security's waiting outside. I looked at the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see two shapes standing in the hallway. Tom Rodriguez and Steve Martinez from building security had been positioned there the entire time. Philip had choreographed this like a military operation, planned every detail for maximum efficiency and humiliation. I walked to the door without another word. Opened it to find Tom and Steve looking uncomfortable as hell. I'd known these guys for years. Tom had worked security for 6 years. We talked about his daughter's nursing school applications, his wife's successful cancer treatment. Steve had been there 3 years, and we'd bonded over our shared military service. He'd done 8 years in the Army before joining MedTech. Now they were here to escort me out like I'd been caught stealing office supplies. Mr. Caldwell, Tom said quietly, maintaining professional distance but clearly hating this assignment. We need to walk you to your office so you can collect personal belongings, then escort you from the building. I know the drill, Tom. My office was on the 3rd floor. Same desk for 5 years, same coffee mug collection lining the windowsill, same family photos arranged on the credenza, Navy commendation certificates hung on the wall next to my quality management certifications, that brass nameplate my team had given me as a joke. Henry Caldwell, the guy who actually reads FDA regulations. Tom handed me a standard cardboard box. I loaded it with coffee mugs, family photos, my military certificates, and the nameplate, 8 years of career progression, reduced to 1 box of personal items. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see every employee on the quality floor suddenly discovering urgent work on their computer screens. Nobody made eye contact except Linda and Carl, who both looked physically sick. They'd watched Philip steal credit for months, and now they were watching him destroy the guy who'd actually done the work. The elevator ride to the lobby felt endless. The reception area went completely silent when we walked through, -30 employees suddenly finding their phones fascinating. Only Steve Martinez from my team caught my eye and nodded slightly, a small gesture of respect that meant more than he probably realized. Outside, it was drizzling, perfect pathetic fallacy for getting fired. I stood there holding my cardboard box in the rain, watching Tom and Steve drive away in the security golf cart when my phone rang. Art Kim, my Navy buddy who'd gotten out the same year I did. We'd stayed in touch, met for drinks every few months to complain about corporate politics and compare war stories from our respective companies. Henry, you getting in this truck or planning to stand there looking like a kick dog? His pickup was idling at the curb. He'd somehow known to be there, probably called by Steve Martinez, who had Art's number from a company barbecue last year. Art had brought bungee cords and secured my pathetic box like furniture headed to Goodwill. We drove in silence for about 5 minutes before Art spoke up. What's your play here? Haven't decided yet. Complete lie. Art had known me since basic training 15 years ago. He could tell when I was already formulating a plan. You know, this is bullshit, right? Whatever Barnes is claiming, yeah, I know. You documenting everything like usual. That was the thing about military training. It teaches you that documentation isn't just bureaucracy, it's survival. In the Navy, if something wasn't properly logged and signed off, people could die. In corporate America, if something wasn't documented, your career could die. Every email, every file, every transaction for 8 years. Art smiled grimly. Then Barnes just made the biggest mistake of his life. At home, I sat in my garage workshop and opened the severance envelope Philip had included with my confiscated equipment. 4 months salary minus 31,000 gross before taxes. Benefits continuation through October. Standard non-disparagement clause preventing me from publicly criticizing the company. Non-compete agreement blocking me from working for medical device competitors for 12 months. But buried in Section 2C was a sentence Philip's lawyers had either missed or underestimated. Departing employees retain whistleblower protection rights per FDA regulations 21 CFR 803.58, including the right to report quality system violations to federal authorities without company retaliation. FDA whistleblower protection. If I reported compliance violations to federal regulators, MedTech couldn't legally retaliate against me. And after 8 years of meticulous documentation, I had records of every quality system shortcut, every compliance corner Philip had tried to cut, every regulatory requirement he'd ignored during the implementation disaster. I called George Morrison, the employment attorney Art had recommended, former military himself, 9-12 years Army JAG before going into private practice. His office was downtown, 15th floor, windows overlooking the river. Guy was maybe 55, gray hair. Looked like he'd seen every type of corporate betrayal humans could devise. I laid out everything methodically. The quality system disaster Philip had created, how my team had fixed it, Philip stealing credit and getting rewarded, then the sudden fraud accusations with zero documentation provided. George took notes on a legal pad, old school, didn't even touch his computer during our meeting. When I finished, he looked up. Did Barnes provide you any documentation about these supposed financial discrepancies? Nothing, just verbal accusations in his office. That's good, very good. How much access did you have to the company's vendor payment systems? Complete access. I authorized payments for quality-related services, lab testing, equipment calibration, consultant fees, software licenses. So theoretically, you could have diverted funds if you'd wanted to. Theoretically, yes, but I didn't. George leaned back in his chair. I believe you. But here's what Barnes is going to argue. You had means, you had opportunity, and he's going to fabricate some kind of motive. Maybe claim you were upset about being passed over for promotion, or that you felt underappreciated. He'll create a narrative that sounds plausible on paper. My chest tightened. So what do? We do 3 things. First, I file a cease and desist letter demanding MedTech stop making defamatory statements about you. Second, I request all documentation related to these alleged discrepancies through formal discovery. Third, and this is the important part, we conduct our own forensic audit. A forensic audit, I asked? You had complete access to financial systems, and so did Barnes. If there are fraudulent transactions, we need to determine who actually initiated them. My gut says Barnes is projecting, accusing you of exactly what he's been doing himself. That thought hadn't occurred to me, but it made perfect sense. Philip had been acting paranoid for months, defensive during budget reviews, vague about certain vendor relationships. Classic guilty behavior. How long would an audit take? With the right forensic accountant, 3 to 4 weeks if we move fast. I know someone who specializes in this, Roger Walsh. Former FBI, worked corporate fraud cases for 20 years. He's expensive but thorough. How expensive? $20,000, maybe $25,000 for a full analysis. I didn't have that kind of money sitting around. My savings account had $8,000, and Susan and I were already stretching financially with her mother's medical bills and Alex's college fund. But I also didn't have a choice. This wasn't about the job anymore. It was about my reputation, my ability to ever work in medical device manufacturing again. Do it. George made a call and got me a meeting with Roger Walsh that afternoon. His office was in a nondescript building that looked more like an accounting firm than an investigation headquarters. But the credentials on his wall told the real story. FBI commendations, certifications in fraud examination, letters of appreciation from 3 different U.S. attorneys. George explained the situation while Roger took notes. When we finished, Roger looked up. This pattern is more common than you'd think. Executive gets caught in financial mismanagement, panics, throws a subordinate under the bus to buy time. How would we prove Barnes is behind this? We trace every transaction he's accusing you of and determine the actual authorization chain. Modern financial systems log everything: who initiated payments, who approved them, timestamps, IP addresses, device identifiers. It's extremely difficult to fake that data convincingly. What do you need from me? Everything. Old emails, text messages, any documentation you kept, system access logs if you have them. I'll also need George to subpoena the company's financial records. I spent 4 hours in Roger's office downloading every work email I'd ever sent from my personal backup drive. Turns out my Navy-trained paranoia about losing data had served me well. I'd been backing up work files to a personal cloud drive every month for 8 years, 11 years of financial records, vendor contracts, budget proposals, correspondence. Roger's eyes lit up when I showed him the extent of my documentation. This is gold. Most people don't keep this kind of detailed records. This is going to save us months of investigation time. The documentation from MedTech arrived 5 days later after George's formal discovery request. 12 pages of vendor payments with my authorization signature, plus a cover memo from Philip outlining suspicious patterns. I read through it twice, then called George. This is heavily edited. What do you mean? These payment records show the right dates and amounts, but they've removed all contextual information: purchase order numbers, approval chains, budget codes, project references. It makes it look like I just randomly authorized payments without proper documentation. Can you prove that with your backup files? Absolutely. Every one of these payments has corresponding documentation: invoices, purchase orders, budget approvals. I spent the weekend cross-referencing every transaction in Philip's accusation against my archived records. All 11 flagged payments had complete documentation: legitimate vendors, proper invoices, appropriate budget allocations. Nothing irregular at all, but one payment jumped out: $12,500 to Precision Calibration Services dated April 8th. I remembered this payment specifically because I'd questioned it at the time. Philip had sent me an invoice and told me to process it immediately for urgent equipment calibration before our FDA inspection. I'd asked for the purchase order. He said he'd email it, but never did. He followed up 3 times that day, insisting the payment had to go through for critical compliance reasons. I'd processed it because he was my boss and claimed it was FDA required. Looking back, that was stupid. The invoice looked generic, basic Word document formatting, no company logo, address listed was a UPS store mailbox. I sent everything to Roger. He called me Sunday evening. You need to come to my office first thing Monday morning. I found something big. Monday morning, Roger's desk was covered with financial records, transaction logs, spreadsheets with highlighted rows. He looked like he hadn't slept. Barnes has been running a vendor fraud scheme for at least 2 years, he said, without preamble. I found 8 payments to shell companies, fake businesses with UPS store addresses. No websites, no business licenses, no employees. Total of $75,000, all processed through accounts he controlled. My hands started shaking. How did you find this? Your backup files documented everything, including invoices and purchase orders. I cross-referenced those against MedTech's official vendor database. These 8 companies don't appear anywhere in procurement records, contract files, or tax documents. They literally don't exist. But Philip had me process one of those payments, right? That's probably when he realized you might notice the pattern if you looked closely. So he fired you and blamed the whole scheme on you. Classic misdirection. The rage hit me like a physical force. This wasn't just about stealing credit anymore. Philip had been systematically embezzling money and was planning to frame me for it. Can we prove Philip created these vendors? I'm working on that. I've traced some payments to bank accounts. If George can subpoena Barnes's financial records, we'll probably find deposits that correspond to these fraudulent payments. We met with George that afternoon. He spent an hour reviewing Roger's findings, asking detailed questions, making notes. Finally, he looked up with a grim smile. Barnes is going to prison. Wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying business records. If this touches any federal contracts, which it probably does since you make FDA-regulated devices, we're looking at federal charges. What about my wrongful termination case? Your case just became nuclear leverage. We go to MedTech and present this evidence. We tell them they can either reinstate you with full back pay, clear your name completely, and cooperate with our criminal referral, or we file a lawsuit that exposes their entire executive team as either complicit or criminally negligent. George sent the demand letter on a Wednesday, 37 pages with executive summary of Roger's findings, timeline of Philip's fraud scheme, my documentation proving every accusation against me was false. Demanded immediate reinstatement, full back pay, public retraction, and cooperation with criminal investigation. CEO William Foster called George directly 2 days later. They talked for 45 minutes. They want to meet Monday. George told me afterward. Foster, general counsel, and board chair. What about Philip? Suspended pending investigation. They're bringing in an outside law firm to audit everything. The meeting was Monday at 10 a.m. in George's conference room. William showed up with general counsel Helen Martinez and 2 attorneys I'd never seen. They looked exhausted, probably spent the weekend reviewing Roger's evidence. William looked physically ill. Henry, I owe you an enormous apology. What Barnes did, what we allowed to happen, there's no excuse. Helen set papers on the table. We've reviewed Mr. Walsh's findings and conducted our own preliminary audit. The evidence is conclusive. Barnes embezzled approximately $75,000 over 2 years and fabricated accusations to cover his tracks. We've terminated his employment and are cooperating fully with law enforcement. She slid the settlement offer across. Full reinstatement to Director of Quality Assurance. Back pay for all missed time. 2 years additional salary as damages minus approximately $100 and $1 and complete retraction sent to all employees and industry contacts. Written letter of recommendation. I looked at William. I don't want my old job back. I want his. Silence. Then Helen said, Henry, the board hasn't approved a replacement VP yet. Philip's position is open. I know this company's operations better than anyone. I've been here 8 years, just saved you from FDA shutdown and exposed an embezzlement scheme. You owe me this. William was quiet for a long moment. The board would need to approve it, then schedule a board meeting. This week, they agreed. Board meeting Thursday. I spent 3 days preparing the presentation of my life. Not about revenge, about competence and leadership. I outlined the quality system implementation disaster and how my team had saved it. Detailed process improvements I'd implemented over 8 years. Showed cost savings, compliance improvements, customer satisfaction metrics. Thursday came. Boardroom, 6 board members, William, Helen, George, and me. I presented for 40 minutes without mentioning Philip once. Board chair Dorothy Phillips leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, what Barnes did was unconscionable. If we appoint you VP Operations, what's your first priority? Complete operational audit. Not just Barnes's fraud, but every process, every system, every control. We're never letting something like this happen again. She smiled. When can you start? Monday. They voted unanimously. Philip's federal trial took 8 months. Wire fraud, embezzlement, making false statements. Roger testified about the forensic audit. I testified about the fraudulent vendor scheme. Jury deliberated 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 4 years federal prison, $75,000 restitution. Lifetime ban from corporate leadership. I didn't attend sentencing. I'd already won. I've been VP Operations for 7 months now. Implemented financial controls that would catch Philip's scheme immediately. Every payment over $2,500 requires dual authorization. Quarterly external audits. Compliance hotline reporting directly to the board. Alex started college last month. We could finally afford tuition. Susan's mother is in a good memory care facility. The quality system passed FDA inspection with 0 findings. Some people think revenge is about getting even. Wrong. Real revenge is succeeding so completely that your enemy's destruction becomes irrelevant. I'm not the guy who got framed anymore. I'm the VP who saved a company and sent a criminal to prison. That's better than even. That's justice. In corporate America, your documentation isn't just paperwork. It's your insurance policy against liars and thieves. The difference between getting destroyed and destroying your enemies isn't luck or connections. It's keeping better records than they do.